Hello gang, it's Mario from the woodfather.com here, and today I'm going to take you through my process for cutting through and half-blind dovetails on the LS Incra positioner. Now I generally follow the same steps that are outlined in the reference guide, but I simplify some of them to make it easier for me to understand, and I think it might help other people as well. Now make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to share a little sneak preview of an app that I'm building, which is going to help make setup on the Incra positioner much easier. Worth checking out. However, before we get to that, we're going to kick off by cutting some joints, and we're going to start off with through dovetails. Alright, let's begin. As I mentioned, first we're going to cut a through dovetail joint. Now the timber I'm using is pine. It's a touch over 10mm thick and around 106mm wide. So for now, the easiest way to figure out the best template for me to choose is to simply flick through the reference guide and line the workpiece up. I like the look of MDovF, so that's the template that I need to prepare. Now I'll drop that template in one of the slots on the Incra and ignore it for now. Let's move on to step 2. MDovF says that I need a 1/2 inch 14-degree dovetail bit, so I'm going to install that, and I'll set the height to 11mm, which is what the reference guide tells me it should be. Now I'm going to move the fence over so that roughly half the bit is hidden, but this doesn't need to be perfect. Once you've done that, line up one of the rulers on the Incra to be a round number like 5 or 10 or 15. We're going to make a couple of test cuts to see if we've got the height of the cutter in the correct spot for our timber. Now I have tried simplifying the clamp process, but I haven't found a better method than what Incra suggests. We use one quick clamp which keeps the guide square and flat to the fence and the table, and then we use a screw clamp to hold the workpiece in place. Then you remove the quick clamp. Run your test pieces through, then move the fence over by the spacing amount in the reference guide and make another cut. You can use the ruler that you just set to a round number to make this step a little bit easier. Now odds are that you won't get the perfect fit right away. If it's too loose like my one, you're going to need to raise your route a bit and try again. If it's too tight and you can't get it together, you'll need to lower the route a bit. Remember, heighten to tighten, lower to loosen. Just remember that the adjustment is made to both pieces, so if you have a 2mm gap, you want to raise the bit 1mm and then test those cuts again. It might take 2 or 3 attempts to get the perfect fit. Once you get it, don't touch the height, lock it in. Now we need to center the bit on our template. The easiest method is to mark center on one end of the board, line it up with the center of your bit, and then lock the fence in place. This is close enough to halfway in the workpiece for our needs. Now make a cut just on a single test piece, take the workpiece out, turn it around and make another cut. You probably won't have a perfectly centered cut here, but that's okay. Turn the router off and place the workpiece on top of the router bit. Then, using the micro adjuster on the Incra fence, slowly crank the fence over until the gap on both sides of the router bit looks the same to you. Without moving the fence, the last thing you need to do is adjust your cutting template. All you need to do here is move the suggested center, in my case it's 11A, to be directly underneath the alignment line. And now, we're good to go. Now there's no magic to this step, you just want to make your cuts for the pins and the tails. If you're making a proper box, you're going to have 2 boards to cut at once, but I'm only making a demo joint, so I'm only going to cut one. I do have a piece of plywood on the back to help with tear out though. Decide which board is going to be your pins or your tails, and then start making your cuts, working your way through the A and B marks on the template. If you're making a box, you're going to have to cut both ends of your board. Once you make your way through one series of cuts, flip the board end for end and make the same series of cuts again. Keep that same edge against the fence. We need to make some further cuts to our pin boards, and just to be clear, the pins are the ones that have got material left on the edges. Set up a stop guide. I like to set it up just a hair past the router bit. Get your pin board and place it flat on the router table with the outside face of the box up. Now you can make your pin board cuts again. So just remember, if your pin board was the B cuts, you need to make the B cuts again. If it was the A cuts, you need to make the A cuts again. Now there are limitations to cutting dovetails with a router bit. You're going to have to take a chisel to the final joint just to knock off this tiny little triangle left over. It's minor and it takes about 10 seconds. Easy peasy. Now I must admit, I wasn't too impressed with the final result here as I had quite a bit of tear out. So I decided to cut the joint again, but this time I used sacrificial boards on both sides of my workpiece and it turned out much nicer. I haven't used pine on the Incra for quite some time, so I should have just gone a little bit slower with my cuts. Okay, that's the through dovetail, so now let's move on to the half blind. This is actually my preferred dovetail joint because you get the strength of a dovetail, but you get one nice clean face. I'm going to use more of the same 10mm thick pine for the tails, so I'm going to use the same MDovF template and the same settings as earlier. For the pin board, I will use some thicker pine, but there's still no change to the bit height, the pattern, or no need for me to recenter the board, so I get to skip the first 3 steps from earlier. Step 4 for half blinds is where things change. We need to cut a rabbet across the tail boards only. The reference guide tells me that I need a 6mm rabbet, so I'm going to cut that in 2 passes. Roughly 4mm and then a further 2mm, so I get a clean cut at the end. Make sure you only do this to the tail boards, not the pins. There's nothing special about this step, just cut the tails like you did earlier. If you're making a box, you're going to have 2 tail boards. Place them back to back so that the non-rabbeted faces are touching, and that will cover you for chip out. I'm only cutting 1, so again I'm using a scrap piece as a sacrificial board. For half blinds, you only cut the pin boards with them laying horizontally on the table. So here you can see why I've chosen a thicker board for the pins. If I was to use the same 10mm board, then the bit would cut right through the top face. Instead, I'm using a thicker board so the top face will remain intact, and therefore the dovetails are going to be hidden. Now of course you could make both the pins and tails from thicker material, but I do like the look of this. So that's how you cut dovetails on the Incra LS Positioner. It's quite a cool little tool, and I love the way that now I'm set up to cut 50 of these and I don't really have to think about anything. Very good for batching stuff out. Now, that little sneak peek that I was talking about. While the reference guides have got a heap of information inside them, I think that they can be simplified a little bit better. So I've been working on an app to help me do just that. I think it's going to be super helpful in the workshop because instead of having to check out this gigantic newspaper for the next step, you can just look at your phone. The idea is that you enter your dimensions and make your choices, and then it gives you all the relevant info that's in the reference guide, but then it prompts you through each step, telling you to set the bit height, to center the board, and all that fun stuff. If you're interested in checking out the app for yourself, head to thewoodfather.com/Incra, and I'll ask the team at Timbecon to put a link to that down below as well. Now, it is early days with the app, so it's not fully featured and may not be super duper accurate yet. But I am still working on it, and I'm interested in getting thoughts from other people who have got the Incra LS Positioner to see if they think it's going to help them as well. Well, there you go. Cheers for watching, guys. I hope that little demonstration has shown you how to cut dovetail joints on your Incra LS Positioner as well. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop them down below and I'll come through and do my best at answering them. My next Incra video is going to be on how to cut box joints, but to make it a little bit more interesting, I might try the double box joints. We'll see how that goes. They look pretty cool. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe to both Timbecon and the Woodfather channels, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers, gang.